Today we have two young people with us who are young conservatives, and would you both like to introduce yourselves?
Yes, of course, I'll go first. My name is Saskia. I'm a young conservative. I recently joined back into politics. I did kind of stop a year ago, but I want my voice to be heard again because I've missed it a lot. So yeah, that's me.
I'm Daniel. I'm from a Liverpool Tory, and I've been in politics since about 2019. I campaigned during the 2019 general election. I've just been in politics ever since then, really.
So, what made you both realise that you're a conservative? Because I feel like the auto position is being left wing, being a Labour supporter. Like, I originally was a member of Labour just because A, I'm working class, B, I'm Northern, and C, I'm a woman. And then it took me a while to realise that I'm a conservative, because it's like, wait, maybe socialism isn't a good idea, maybe all this progressive ideology isn't a good idea. So do you guys relate to that? What's your own experiences?
Yeah, I think for me, it was being at school and like, God, how old was I at the time? I must have been in like year 8. So this is going back to like 2014. And like I saw like even then like the pronoun, like all the stuff with the pronouns and stuff like that, I could see it starting then, and how woke people are, and people in my year, they just felt some sort of sense of entitlement because they were born, they were owed everything, and just the way people they whine and go on in my year. And then Brexit came about, and then I was belittled by like every teacher. Like there was a pro-EU assembly done by the history and politics teacher, and he had no shame. I wasn't there for it, but I was told about it, and I just think from that I knew I wasn't left wing. Everyone would bang on about, so especially in like history and stuff, would bang on about this great idea of socialism. And I knew I just wasn't for any of that. But I mean, it did cause me a lot of grief, but that's how I knew personally.
I came up from a different angle. Mine was more historical. I was basically a history nerd, so I looked through Britain's past, and I saw Britain as a great nation, how they helped spread Christianity across the world and democracy. And many people at the time in high school were attacking Britain, for example, for the British Empire. I saw many upsides to the empire at the time, so I was more like a more right-wing student who supported British spreading democracy across the world. And I also saw Brexit as the opportunity for Britain to finally step away from the European Union and become its own sovereign nation. So that's where I started moving towards being a conservative in the schooling system. And I was kind of pushed that way because many teachers would push a left-wing narrative, of course, talking about socialism and this current gender stuff that is currently happening now. And I totally disagree with it. So I was pushed towards being a conservative by history and because of the teachers.
Have you both faced a lot of backlash for your conservative views because they're not the norm? And I feel like there's a general hatred towards being right-wing and going against like BLM, going against socialism, going against like feminism. Have you experienced that when you speak out about these issues?
Yeah, definitely. I must be honest, from my secondary school, I've literally everybody, like I don't talk to anybody from my secondary school. They all blocked, removed me. I've got countless messages of being accused of being a racist. And then when they found out that I was standing to, I was a candidate for the local elections last year, the Conservatives. And when everybody found that out, I was just kind of like, it was just DMs, like unfollowing, like blocking, like people were posting stuff on their story about me, and I knew it was relentless. But I got to a point where I didn't really, I think you just have to come to a point where you don't care anymore, because I know I stand strong in what I believe in. And yeah, a lot of backlash. I mean, as you know, I did TikTok and stuff like that, and that certainly created a lot of backlash. But as I said, you know what you're signing up to when you do stuff like this. So I just think just comes with it, really.
Yeah, Daniel.
I also experienced a lot of backlash, mainly by teachers actually. I've written an article on it for the Conservative Friends of Education about my experience in schooling. I experienced a lot of bullying, of course. Nazi was often thrown around because I was a conservative for some reason, because Liverpool, you see people in Liverpool see conservatives as far right fascists, so I was quite often called Nazi. Many teachers refused to support me, and a lot of the time I was silenced. On one occasion in the debating society, I was banned because my for what I was saying was too offensive, apparently. So I have experienced a lot of backlash, but luckily, socially, I don't really get attacked that often. My family are very supportive of what I do, so it's been more in education rather than anywhere else.
Do you think this is more of an issue online? For example, I only came out as conservative during the first lockdown, and before that, not really anyone knew about my political beliefs. And this was during when BLM rose and everyone was posting like infographics on their story. And I remember posting like a Ben Shapiro video, and this girl literally was like, Jess, why have you not been posting stuff to support BLM? And I think she'd been talking with her friends because she said I was a Trump supporter when I had a previous conversation with a friend about supporting Boris Johnson. So it's like they don't even care about these issues. And they just throw around these terms of you, as you've both identified. They just say you're racist, you're sexist, you're a Nazi. And it's so ridiculous because like these are actual problems with society. Like I'm against racism, I'm sure you're both against racism, sexism, all these things. And for people to just throw these words around, it just gets rid of the meaning. And it's like they don't care about it. So, but when I'm doing vox pops, for example, when I'm speaking to people in public, when because like you both were in education during lockdown as well, when it is in public, when it is in person, I feel like people are much more tame. But online, they tend to be very hostile. They tend to just, blurt out these words which they don't actually mean. They say these slogans. And in real life, these slogans don't hold up. And it's also very much, it's harder to hate someone in front of you. It's harder to like dehumanize them in front of you. Have you guys had experiences of this?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I came across a girl actually the other day who I went to school with and was one of the people who was with a group of friends who basically they all blocked me and all of that stuff. And when like I had to have a conversation with her for my job, and I think the way that they were online, they'd be like it in person. Like you think that they'd stand by their morals and be how they were in person, but you don't see any of that. It was almost like that was completely forgotten about. And I think you're right. I think a lot of it online, it's just virtue signaling, isn't it? It's just like, I'm not a racist. It's like the whole vaccine thing with on Facebook where you could set your profile picture of like, I've had my second jab. And I'm just like, who actually cares? Like, I'm not being funny, but like no one cares. And I just think people need to stop virtue signaling and actually do stuff instead of just posting an infographic, because it doesn't do anything. Like it does absolutely nothing. I just think it's awful.
Daniel, what do you think?
I got to agree. Social media, people find it a lot easier to attack you. It might be the keyboard warriors who feel they're safe behind some profile picture. But I've got to say, I've experienced it face to face quite often, but it's more in collective groups. Like when I have a conversation with someone about politics, just me and them, we're perfectly fine. We may disagree. Some of them may agree with me quite often. But when they're in a big group or in a full classroom, they'll quite often see this as some tribal warfare and attack me individually as a big group. So I do find social media is more aggressive, but I can see it happening a lot in schools, especially when there's big groups against one single student.
Why do you think young people are more persuaded by left-wing ideology than right-wing ideology?
I think with being left wing, they give you, it's like Jeremy Corbyn and all his promises, like free this, free that. And I don't think young, like that, to me, that was a massive point where I realised I was a conservative. And I think going back to that, these people, they don't actually do their own research. They don't think, they go with the current trends. And I think a lot of people they are left, but I don't actually think they are left wing. They just want to come across as a real nice, virtuous person, and to be seen as left wing, they think that's the way forward, and it's not. And it's like going back to what you said, and to be a conservative, you're more likely to get branded a racist, a sexist. And do you know what? It's just awful. I don't think a lot of young people can think for themselves anymore. I just think it's gone completely down the drain.
What do you think, Daniel?
I think it's more the education system at the moment. Education is full of left-wing and woke teachers who push the current narrative, and in ingrained on students. We've had this for the last 20 or 30 years of an education system moving towards, it is currently a left-wing position, and it pushes the current narrative, and students and young people end up taking that into the start of their lives, and that's why the current younger generation are going to be more left-wing. But you can also see it in, some people would say that left-wing people might be more compassionate. They may think they should offer free things to people, but I don't think younger students and younger people really understand what socialism is, and I don't think they do enough reading into the ideologies that they claim to be.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think, to be fair, from someone who doesn't, like, if you're someone who doesn't know much about politics and you just see this African American guy get killed in America, and why was this police officer allowed on this guy's neck for 8 minutes? Like, how can that be allowed? Surely, like, they must think this must be a massive issue in America. We must do something about it. And because, like, that's the obvious way to think. You know, you see an issue, everyone's pushing this issue, which is an issue. You know, police brutality, I'd argue, is an issue. I think we need more police accountability. But from, like, with the Sarah Everard case as well, a young woman gets killed by a police officer and people want a response. And because I think this is a weakness of the Conservative Party and general conservatism, we don't offer a right-wing support response. The argument for for women's protection would be like perhaps self-defense, perhaps better policing if there's more police accountability, private property, private security, even when it comes to like bouncers and nightclubs and stuff. Like, that is the right-wing response, but you don't really see that. You just see a lot of hating on left-wing ideas, which is useful because, like, these ideas need to be debunked, but there's not really anything coming forward from the right. It's like, I think the Conservative Party right now doesn't really stand for anything, and I think a lot of young Conservatives believe this too. And the only reason why young people vote Conservative today, well, anyone votes Conservative today, realistically, in 2019, it was Brexit and also hating Jeremy Corbyn. In previous elections, we've been in for a decade. In previous elections, it's been because the Conservatives are not Labour. And that's not enough to build a country on. And that's the effect. Like, the problems we have today is the effect of that. By voting for something to oppose something else, that's not what you should do in a democracy. But unfortunately, that's how our society has become. Our political situation has become. And I think the Conservatives need to stand for something. Like Margaret Thatcher, she had so much conviction. That's what she was known for. She changed Britain completely. And I think we need, not necessarily, even though I think they should be of the same ideological persuasion, not even necessarily that, just someone who believes in something, because I don't see that of the current modern day Conservative Party. What do you guys think?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think I nearly just completely got rid of my Conservative membership a couple of months ago because I agree with you that I don't really see them standing for anything. I completely disagree with the whole lockdown situation and how Boris kind of just went for it on that, but there isn't a strong opposition, and I completely agree with you. There's just nothing for the Tories to be against, and I just think there's just nothing actually coming from any of this. It's just people choosing the better out of the two evils, which obviously is the Conservatives at the minute, but I definitely think they need a massive shake-up and a change, to be honest.
What do you think, Daniel? Are you for the Conservatives?
I'm a big Conservative supporter, but I think we need to return to Conservative values. I think we need to go back to socially conservative, so supporting things like family. We need to go back to small government, small taxation, and we need to go back to, as you said, Margaret Thatcher, and we do need to return. We need to fight off this current woke agenda. We need to stop all this silly pronoun stuff and all the radical theories which are being pushed forward on children. We need to return, like John Major's, back to basics. We need to go back to traditional Conservative values.
What do you both think of Boris Johnson?
It's a difficult one. I do, in a sense, feel sorry for him because, Prime Minister would have expected the coronavirus pandemic and how to navigate through properly, especially when you've got all like the experts coming at you saying we need to do a lockdown, and then you've got, you know, the British people saying we don't want to be in a lockdown. I think, you know, it's very hard for him, but I don't think there's a better alternative at the minute. I mean, there's a lot of people that are just like, they just shout, get rid, but I'm like, think about it, like, is there a better alternative? There's not at the minute. And I think, you know, just a difficult position, really.
What do you think, Daniel?
I think Boris Johnson has totally failed at being Prime Minister. I think the hype around him being Prime Minister, be this libertarian, bouncing baboon all over the country and bringing in fact-right policies, but he's failed. He's failed during lockdown. The only good thing he's ever actually done is Brexit, and then he's failed with the current tax increases. And I think we need to replace him as soon as possible, but I don't know the candidate who will replace him. I'd like Steve Baker, but he's not a front runner, and everyone else in the cabinet are idiots really and shouldn't really run this country. So Boris is the current only candidate who can run this country, and we need to find a suitable candidate who can take him over.
I find it quite interesting with Boris Johnson in terms of comments. When people comment on my videos or on my posts, they're always like, you're a conservative, defend this policy, this ideology. And it's just like, no, that's not me. And they wouldn't say the same to Labour, because they properly understand that some young people are more Keir Starmer, some people are more, Jeremy Corbyn. And they've accepted that. But with Conservatives, they think all young Conservatives are the same. And they like to pin us down to this cliche that we're all rich, that we're all male, straight. They like to have this idea. When you go to Conservative Party conference, that's so far from the truth. It's so silly. Do you feel like there is that stereotype? And have you experienced that stereotype? And have you experienced anything, because you break that stereotype? Have you experienced any reaction to that, and how do people react to that?
Yeah, I think for me it was mostly social media, especially on TikTok, people commenting you must go to private school, you're a posh snob, you don't know what it's like to be a real person. And it's no, I've never went to private school, and I don't understand why people think that. And I think that's where I know a lot of people who are conservative and they're too scared to come forward, especially locally where I am. There's not a lot of young people standing forward to be conservative. I think it just shouts people down, but I think a lot of it is to do with social media. But I mean, what can you do about it? There's literally nothing you can do.
What about you, Daniel?
Well, as I'm not as active as you two on social media, I experienced a lot of it in schooling. Everyone thought I was some rich snob and had a massive house, when it's not true. I'm a working class Tory. I come from a working class background, and I've broken that trend, and I'm a young conservative. And I've also found that out in our area. I'm basically the de facto YC chairman for our area at the moment, and I've found we have 30 members and only 3 of them are active, and the 27 of them want to keep quiet. They pay for the membership and don't do any activity because they're too scared to come out as conservatives, especially in Liverpool, where there's some stigma against being a conservative because they believe that factor ruin the city, which is totally untrue in my opinion. But there's so much stigma around young people being conservatives. There's stereotypes, as you said. They all think we're rich, we all think we're posh, or we all think we go to private schools. And that's totally not true. As you said, at the conference, most of the people I met were from working class backgrounds, and the minority were really the upper class, richer young conservatives.
How do you think we get more young people to, not necessarily, because I do think a lot of young people do realise, that there's a lot of nonsense going around, there's more than 2 genders and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people do catch on, but they are afraid to say. And I think the same is true for conservative beliefs. So how do we get these people who are probably, I don't know whether they don't care about politics, they just don't care, they'll just follow it, even though they have a grudge against it in their head, but they won't say anything out loud. Or maybe they are scared to come forward, because it is scary. I receive a lot of hate, and I understand why some people want to get away from that. I understand why people won't want to do that. So how do we get more young people to come forward and say they're a conservative?
I think for me, in my experience, it all starts at like a local level. Like, I think if you're like local Conservatives are, modern, I mean, where I am, they're not exactly modern. There's not a lot of young people. And I think if they make it more appealing to young people instead of just keeping the same people doing the same stuff all the time, I think there's just not a lot of that going on. I think, well, this is just for me and my experience. I mean, like I said, I stood as a candidate, but I just got told the whole time, you're not going to win the seat, like you're not going to win because the area is Labour. And I think a lot of areas don't make it feel very inviting, whereas I think Labour, they know they can manipulate the young, like they know they can do that, and I think they appeal to them more because of that nature, because they can just manipulate them.
What do you think, Daniel?
Well, first of all, I think the main way we actually get just young people as a whole to get into politics is to try and create a more tolerance of ideologies, because we've got people like Angela Rayner shouting Tory scum at Conservatives, and we can't have that in modern politics. We need to have a bigger tolerance and understanding of what people's beliefs are. And if we had that, we'd have more people openly coming into politics. And as well, to get more younger people to be openly conservative is social media. I think we're doing very well at the moment. For example, you, Jess, you're a conservative political commentator. Got people like Calvin Robinson. He's not a member, but he's a conservative. We've got Dan Grimes as well. We've got a number of big influencers at the moment who are pushing conservative values and conservative beliefs on social media. And I think that's the way forward for Conservatives. We need to move towards social media. Like my local association, they're very anti-social media, and I think that's the problem. I think you need to start at the local level. I think local politicians, councillors need to push more social media, more interaction with younger people and the public as a whole across social media.
I think we sort of touched on this issue before, but I think one of the issues is with young people, they want something to believe in. They tend to be more radical. They tend to want change. And the Conservative Party doesn't offer that. Like, Thatcher won the youth vote, like twice, I think. Like, she completely changed the youth vote. So I do think it is possible. I just think young people want to believe in something. But like I said before, the Conservatives, and not just party Conservatives, but ideological Conservatives, they often don't believe in something. So what do you think Conservatives should believe in? What do you think the Conservative Party should advocate for and believe in?
I think a lot of things, I think, but most, like I said, starting at a local level, and I think pushing. I don't really know how to answer the question, to be completely honest with you. Like, if I come from where, like, if I just be completely honest, I've never studied politics at school. I've never done any of that. I'm very, like, not new, but I mean, like, I'm very new to this whole thing. And I think for me, I have to learn from scratch, really. And I'm just coming on here just to voice my opinion, but I don't know everything. But I think for me, just to cover that question, I just think start locally. That's just what I believe in, really.
Have you got any comments, Daniel?
I don't think that's a problem of the Conservative Party. I think it's a problem of conservatism, the ideology itself. It's more of an anti-ideology. It's basically not wanting major change, and I think that's hard for young people to attach onto, because they've not experienced what it was like in the past. They've not experienced traditional values before. So I think that's more of a problem with conservatism, and why conservatism is more of an old and more elderly supporters. Like Church just said, if you're not liberal by the time you're 25, you have no heart. If you're not conservative by the time you're 50, you have no brain. So I think that's the problem. It's more conservatism, not the Conservative Party itself.